He has 5 running backs. I would bench here in week 15. The first guy, Todd Gurley, the Atlanta Falcons. Gurley, he just hasn't gotten the job done. And like I keep saying, that knee finally gave out, and he's definitely not 100% as the last few weeks wind down here in the football season. And Gurley now, he hasn't reached double-digit fantasy points since week 9, where he had a mediocre game in that one too, and he's a touchdown-dependent running back. On the season, he was only getting 50 to 60 total yards a game. He don't do much in the passing game as well as Gurley, and now in his last few weeks, at week 11 at New Orleans, he had 8 carries, 26 yards, and 1 catch for 3 yards. Week 12, he missed with the knee injury. Week 13, 8 carries, 16 yards, a catch, and 4 yards. And last week at the Chargers, only 6 carries, 19 yards, 2 catches, 12 yards. This week, he's got a tough matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well, who give up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to running backs. And Todd Gurley, he's not getting the volume, he's not making an impact, and he's not doing much. So this week, there's no reason to start him. You got to sit him on the bench, and he was also a guy I said to drop if there's better options on your wire. So bench Gurley. The second running back I'm going to bench this week's David Johnson of the Houston Texans. Johnson, he missed last week's game because he was on the COVID list, but now he's back, and he's got a tough matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts that give up the 12th least amount of fantasy points to running backs. And in his ball game in Week 13 versus the Colts, Johnson only had 10 carries, 44 yards, but the rushing touchdown saved his day for a 10.4 fantasy day. But Johnson, I don't think he'll have a good game. I don't think he's going to do much again, and who knows if he's back to full strength with this virus is Johnson. So Johnson's a guy, I had him 30th in my rankings if he was going to start this week, and he's a guy I would stay away from because I just can't trust him heading into a big fantasy playoff game, and pretty much his ceiling's 12 to 13 fantasy points, and I don't think he could even reach that this week. So I'm going to bench David Johnson. The third running back to bench this week's Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. Elliott, a disappointing season it's been for him. He was a first top 3 or 4 pick in most fantasy drafts coming into the year, and Elliott, he hasn't been explosive at all. Injuries to Dak Prescott and 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen being injured on the Dallas Cowboy offense hasn't helped as well. But Elliott, he's banged up a little with a calf and a hamstring injury. He's only cracked 100 yards once this season on the ground. And this week versus San Francisco, I could see another mediocre ball game for Elliott where he only scores 7 to 10 fantasy points this week. And he's a guy, I just can't trust him. I know it's the semifinals, but with all the elements against him, the bad matchup, the hurt offensive line, and a mediocre quarterback behind center, I just want to stay away from Zeke because he's just not getting the job done now since Andy Dalton's been in there as the starter. The fourth running back I'm going to bench is Gio Bernard of the Cincinnati Bengals. Bernard last week, he fumbled early in the game, and he pretty much got benched the rest of the way. Joe Mixon, he's not coming back this week. They got P. Ryan and Williams there. That backfield, as a whole, is a total mess in Cincinnati. None of those guys I want to play or even have on my roster. Bernard, he was a running back that I said to drop this week, and this week he's just not going to do anything. P. Ryan, he might even be the starter. Nothing official yet with that. So Bernard, bench him and drop him as well. So just stay away from him. And the fifth and final running back I'm going to bench this week is DeAndre Washington of the Miami Dolphins. It looks like Myles Gaskin, he's going to be out another week here with the COVID on the COVID list. He missed last week and now this week. So Gaskin, he hasn't caught a break this season for the most part. And Salvin Ahmed, he practiced yesterday. I would think he would get the bulk of the carries if he's back after missing a few weeks, because when he had the role as the every down back in Gaskin's first absence out of the lineup, he was pretty good, Ahmed. So I think he'll be the starter this week if he plays. And DeAndre Washington, he was picked up in a bunch of leagues last week, but this week I can't trust him anyway with the tough matchup and a limited workload, so it's easier to drop him or just bench him. So that's 5 running backs I'm going to bench this week for week 15.